Welcome to session 4 of the ICTM dialogues on collaborative methodologies for decentering power hierarchies in education, museum curation, and artistic research. I am Sooi Beng, the moderator for the session. And our presenters today include Jorge de Carvalho from the University of Brasilia, Matthias Louis from Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and the Arts, Daisy Montado from Federal University of Amazon, Wei-Ya from the University of Music and Performing Arts Vienna, and myself from University Sains Malaysia. So what we will do today is to play the first three videos. Then we will have a 5 to 10 minute summary from the presenters about how they decentered power hierarchies and the challenges that they face. This is so that you can have a rest from watching the videos. After the 5 to 10 minute discussion, then we will play the last three videos and then open the floor for discussion. Yeah. Okay. So Carlos, we can start now with the introduction. As Linda Tuhi Weiss-Smith says in her seminal book on decolonizing methodologies, decolonization is a long-term process involving the bureaucratic, cultural, linguistic, and psychological divesting of colonial power. It connotes the ongoing process of recovering and reclaiming histories, knowledge, and values that have been negated by colonial and neo-colonial hegemonic structures that fabricates racial, gender, and other types of discrimination and inequalities. Post-colonial scholars have raised questions about the hegemony of Western, specifically American and European, colonial thought in academic research, particularly in methodology and theoretical framework. However, decolonization does not mean the rejection of all Western knowledge. Decolonization demands fundamental changes in relations of power. It requires the decentering of hegemonic power hierarchies between the global north and the global south, the nation state and the public, the researcher and the research, the academic and the artist, theory and practice, and institutions and the public. In the ways of conducting research, what to research, and how to represent the researched. It calls for the recognition of local and indigenous ways of knowing. How do we decenter power hierarchies? We can do this by decentering narratives of those in power and including the voices of the marginalized that have been silenced by studying minorities, indigenous people, women, LGBT, and so on. Secondly, we can do this by studying non-elite forms and culture from below. And thirdly, by promoting the balance of voices from indigenous and non-indigenous scholars, institutions and the public, insiders and outsiders, scholars and communities in research. We embrace the critical approach in ethnomusicology that sees culture as continually being constructed and discordant. In this approach, the performing arts are not merely expressions of cultural diversity, but have socio-political dimensions and are sites of struggle. To decenter power hierarchies, we are required to shift our fieldwork methods and modes of presentation. Approaches need to be formulated to empower the less powerful communities to define, interpret, and sustain their own musical cultures. In order to do this, it is necessary to complicate the power relationships between the actors, such as the state versus local people, and university academics versus communities, and develop new ways of presentations that can include the voices from below. Academics need to share power by incorporating communities as collaborative partners and producers of knowledge, and including their knowledge and practices in research. But sharing power and giving voices to the communities remain challenging as power imbalances occur in collaboration. In this panel, we share the collaborative methodologies and challenges in 5 different decolonizing projects pertaining to music education, museum archiving, indigenous ethnomusicology, and research creation in Latin America, Taiwan, and Malaysia. Thank you.
Decolonizing Eurocentric Music Education, the meeting of knowledges as a third paradigm in ethnomusicology. I will try to offer the colonization of Western classical music in music schools worldwide. I will try to offer a dialogue with Sooi Bentan's introduction to the panel, where she stresses the importance of collaborative methodologies and connects them with decolonization of academic research. Historically, one of the strongholds of Western epistemic colonialism worldwide is the area of music. Schools of music in the 5 continents are engaged on the reproduction and creation of Western classical music, and in many countries, local musical traditions either play a secondary role in the curriculum or are simply absent from it. Thus, one of the power hierarchies we have to overcome is epistemic hierarchy, which has to be addressed in a set of articulated moves. And one of them is certainly a radical change in the curriculum of the music and dance schools. In order to do this, we developed in Brazil the project called Meeting of Knowledges, whose main objective is to invite masters of traditional non-Western musical systems, such as Indigenous, Afro-Brazilian, popular culture traditions, and so on, to teach regular courses about their musical genres in our universities, regardless of the fact that most of them are illiterate and have no training in classical Western music. Second, the Meeting of Knowledges, bringing masters of non-Western musical cultures as lecturers in music schools. The Meeting of Knowledges is in line with Sooi Beng's 4th point, to empower the less powerful communities to define, interpret, and sustain their own musical cultures. End quote. By acting as lecturers, they will be able to interpret and represent themselves as musicians in front of those who have historically interpreted their musical cultures while silencing their voices. Over a decade ago, traditional masters demanded the right and the opportunity to teach their musical and dance cultures in public schools and universities. That was a call for decolonization of our institutions, and our reply was to implement the Meeting of Knowledges. In this sense, the project can be conceived as a kind of reciprocal collaboration. We ethnomusicologists collaborate with the communities in their projects of registering, creating, reproducing, and promoting their musical cultures. And the masters of music of the communities collaborate with us in the common task of decolonizing the curriculum of our schools of music so that they can teach the entire range of musical cultures of our countries and not only Western music as they have done until now. 3. Decolonization is a collaborative set of steps. We need to decolonize our institutions, but we cannot decolonize them alone. A unilateral process of decolonization will probably turn out to be just a new wave of colonization, since the oppressed cultures will once more be excluded from the supposed process of renewal. Therefore, we need an epistemic collaboration from masters to build a decolonizing way of thinking together. This is the type of epistemological awareness brought by the Meeting of Knowledges as a paradigm for a plurilateral and collaborative decolonization of the current music and dance curriculum. What appears to have made the Meeting of Knowledges possible to grow in Brazil was a happy conjuncture that allowed the articulation of a fourfold agency, with all its components operating at the same time and in the same direction: state institutions, academics, communities, and masters. and all of them demanding together the presence of traditional knowledges and of the masters of those knowledges inside universities. This way, the fourfold agency works as a circulatory and retroactive movement. Academics are present in the communities, and masters are present in higher education institutions. Once the masters assume the role of our fellow lecturers and researchers, it will be possible to create specific protocols of epistemic dialogue in all areas of knowledge and disciplines, in sciences and in humanities. In this sense, the Meeting of Knowledges proposes to build a university environment based not only on shared praxis and collaboration, but also on shared logos. Instead of monologos, we will promote plurilogos, expression of various different music and dance epistemes, mutually influencing one another, so that education, research, creation, and action can be promoted together. This way, we may open the way for a pluriepistemic and dialogical interdiscipline of ethnomusicology, always collaborative, open-ended, and sensitive to the contexts of the immense variety of musical traditions and of masters of music in the world. 4. Three main paradigms in ethnomusicology: research, ethnography, and analysis, collaboration and participation, or applied ethnomusicology, and the meeting of knowledges in music. First paradigm, the classical chart by Guido Adler of comparative musicology. Charles Seegers, in Unified Field Theory, he projects the conspects of the resources of the musicological process, which is an exact counterpoint to Adler's chart. And John Blacken, with his cultural analysis of music, considered Adler's concept of Tonkunst perfect to conceptualize music worldwide. In all those approaches, emphasis is put on analysis, ethnography, and interpretation. With variants, this is the model of ethnomusicology as a discipline based on a subject-object relationship which prevailed during the entire 20th century. Second paradigm, applied ethnomusicology. Based on ethnography and analysis, the ethnomusicologist can help to develop projects of interest and need of the communities where she and he does research and participate. The second paradigm is based on a subject-subject relation, a necessary condition to make possible collaboration and or participatory action with oppressed or traditional communities. And for this reason, it is making a significant impact in the present generation of ethnomusicologists. More recently, a new situation emerged in Brazil when the masters of traditional non-Western musical cultures demanded their right to teach in our schools and universities. As they started to enter universities as temporary or visiting lecturers, a favorable moment appeared to pressure for a radical change in the curriculum and form a new generation of scholars and researchers who will be equipped to develop a full and bilateral collaborative research and action. Third paradigm. The third paradigm provided by the Meeting of Knowledges gives the basis to continue our collaboration with oppressed and excluded communities, and at the same time to decolonize the curriculum of music and dance in universities. In this case, the shift of power is unprecedented and amounts to a revolution in the entire concept and practical functioning of a school of music and dance that moves from a monomusical to a plurimusical institution. The three paradigms are presented here just as a chronology. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other, with no overtones of an evolutionary argument behind the description of subject-object relations. The only new question about the lesser or greater functionality of those paradigms is how each of them may perform to solve the second issue put forward by Sooi, the decolonization of the curriculum of music and dance schools. Apart from this, we can choose an alternate and alternate the paradigm that will appear more adequate for one's particular activity. Be in an analytical moment of our researches, or in the moment of collaborative and participatory work with the communities. In both cases, the collaboration will also involve epistemic collaboration. I will now offer a presentation of the Meeting of Knowledges. This is a map of Brazil, just to show the multiracial and multi-ethnic country with numerous indigenous epistemologies and musical systems, 305 indigenous nations and 107 different indigenous languages, half of the population being blacks and half white almost. Here is a map of the distribution of the Meeting of Knowledges so far in Brazil. We can see that in 10 years it now is in the 5 regions of the country, 12 universities going up to 15 and 20. 155 masters have already given lectures in universities in a network of 120 teachers. Here just to show one of the flute masters, Arifira, and show the polymathy or the disciplinarity of masters of non-musical traditions. It comes from artisanal, pedagogy, psychology, politics, cosmology, philosophy, environment management, medicine, all behind a flute master. Here's some of the masters who taught music at the Meeting of Knowledges from the 5 regions of the country: Indigenous, Afro-Brazilians, the syncretic traditions, sacred traditions, drums, viola, private and traditional Brazilian violas, and so on. The areas of tradition and academic knowledge at the Meeting of Knowledges. So we have tradition from the indigenous, from the religious communities of African origin, from the Maroon communities, agro-extractive and agroecological communities, urban groups from diverse popular traditions, and the different areas of exact sciences, agricultural sciences, applied social sciences, arts, humanities, letters, linguistics. In the areas of the Meeting of Knowledge, they cover, sometimes the same master will cover various of them: spiritualities, health, environment and food production, arts of performances and celebrations, music, dance, masks, folk plays, mediation and political leadership, cosmologies, philosophy. And being Brazil such a multilingual country, universities were just monolingual, and now African languages, Yoruba, Kimbundu, and at least 14 indigenous languages are now being taught by the masters. Here are some of the masters, indigenous and blacks, in different situations. And the last point, we are doing the cartography of the Masters of Traditional Knowledges. As the process opens, the project is widened. We are documentary and surveying the map of the masters in order to provide universities with information about the regions in which they are located. So far, we have located like 2,219 masters mapped. With this, we can finally collaboratively decolonize our music schools. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody, my name is Matthias Levy. I am from Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts, and I will talk today about my lived experiences over the last 15 years in the Grand Savannah, a region located between Venezuela, Guyana and Brazil. It is important to note that methods and perspectives have changed over the last 15 years. As you see, there are 5 topics: collaborative research, collaborative restitution, collaborative theorizing, collaborative archiving, and collaborative curating. These 5 topics describe the recent state of the field. I need to underline the notion recent, as I see collaborative and collaboration as a first step of interaction. The next step has to be the transformation of power relations in all contexts of ethnographic museums in Europe. In this video, I will give 2 short examples. One focuses on the process of collaborative research and restitution. The second example is about the initial attempts of collaborative archiving. Needless to say, collaborative research is a basis for collaborative archiving. Following the examples, a short side effect of an unplanned revitalization will be presented as well. So I arrived at the Grand Sabana in 2005. In my luggage I had the recordings of the German anthropologist Theodor Koch-Grünberg. In 1911 he recorded 88 wax cylinders in a village called Colmelemont. The village is marked by the red dot in the map. Furthermore, he made a short movie. This movie contains a Parichara dance song, a genre he also recorded on wax cylinder. I put his recording as a soundtrack accompanying his movie. In 2006, I was introduced to Babina Lambos. She's a Kamarakoto indigenous researcher. We realized that we have a lot of common interests. Babina started to record indigenous music of her people in the 1990s. And she was very interested in the material of Theodor Koch-Grünberg. So we started our collaborative restitution. During our first hearing analysis, we realized very quickly that these recordings cannot be heard by everybody in the indigenous community. Firstly, we started to intensify the research on specific recordings. Therefore, we visited indigenous specialists with long-term experiences, selected and contacted by Babina Lambos. Secondly, Babina decided, together with the specialists, which song from Koch-Grünberg's recordings can be presented to a broader indigenous audience. Not all indigenous specialists only wanted to listen. They started to perform their own repertoire. Here you see Raimundo Perez in Cabanayen. He dances a Parichara song, just to give you a short example of how this genre sounds today, 100 years after Koch-Grünberg's recording. I also show these videos because we used them later in our workshops with Yango Pemon. In this picture, you see further specialists. We talked to Simon Lopez in Cabanayen and Florinda Hernandez in Tarauparu, an indigenous community on the Venezuelan-Brazilian border. Most of these older specialists have a very specific knowledge of a specific Pemon music genre. In a second step, we did workshops with younger Pemon, mostly members of El Sistema. These younger Pemon learned to play European music like Bach or Beethoven.
Sobre Camaracota, y ese mismo Balbina, Pemon Bellese, Meru Merupachi. Pero te sepra, hay que mapo con noche hora, metado horas. Muy metado serenga. ¿Entendieron la canción que interpreté? Nada.
We always prepared the workshops very carefully, selecting songs and or genres we can present to the younger Pemon. Naturally, we also included Babina's repertoire. Only a short part was dedicated to Koch-Grünberg's recordings. This short example refers to our collaborative research as a baseline for the first attempts of collaborative archiving. The initial point was that I was contacted by the Ethnologisches Museum in Berlin. Babina and I were invited to participate in a sharing knowledge project headed by Andrea Scholz. The main tool of that project is a database that includes mainly representations of physical objects from the region. Huge parts belong to Ethnographica collected by Theodor Koch-Grünberg as well. Babina Lambos and I started to work on the database in Santa Elena de Guairén in Venezuela. The idea was to see what objects are stored at the Ethnologisches Museum Berlin and which associations, ideas or concepts are important to note from the indigenous point of view. Babina and other indigenous experts noted several sensitive objects. As this video will be published on YouTube and other free accessible channels, I will not go in any further details. But these objects were one of the reasons why Balbina Lambos and I, together with other indigenous specialists and anthropologists working on the database, were invited to a conference at the Ethnologisches Museum Berlin in 2018. Balbina Lambos presented our work concentrating on the aforementioned sensitive data. The details are important when understanding how to do collaborative archiving, in particular when ontological units of the so-called tangible and non-tangible objects are non-separable unit. That means that the whole archive structure of a museum needs to be rearranged and performance spaces for singing and dancing have to be established. To give you a short idea, I will show indigenous performances and knowledge practices that are based on less sensitive ontological qualities. So, back to the Parichara dance song. At the end of the conference, Balbina headed a Parichara dance cycle together with all the invited indigenous specialists, anthropologists and museum staff. As can be seen in the video, all participants lined up, singing and dancing together. Balbina Lambos referred to the special history between Pemon people and German anthropologists. Later, we visited the archive of the Ethnologisches Museum. We were very interested in the material culture. Here we see how Balbina plays a dance stick we saw earlier in the Koch-Grünberg movie. It was very emotional for her and for me. It was also the first time I was in the archive of the Ethnologisches Museum. We were able to see all the objects and to touch them, as well as to discuss several aspects with indigenous specialists from other or nearby regions. In this video, Balbina demonstrates how to dance a Morua dance, a jungle Koch-Grünberg had recorded. This example gives a short impression of the interactions between the different fields of indigenous communities, the specialists, the workshop, and finally the ethnographic museum. As I mentioned before, I cannot show the examples of any ontologically relevant performances. This is important to mention as it reveals how the colonial matrix still generates situations in which even restitution is hard to implement. It is about both physical objects and non-physical objects, such as sound, that were once taken from an area charged with a specific entity, but, due to missing interaction, these entities are not manageable for recent generations, making restitution complicated on one hand. On the other hand, showing these objects in any exhibition must be forbidden. Therefore, entities such as these needs to be stored in a colonial graveyard. Finally, we traveled back to the Gran Sabana to Santa Elena de Guairén in Venezuela. We showed all our travel experiences to the younger Pemon in a workshop. Together we watched all the videos I have shown before and we discussed them. We received amazing attention and all decided to dance and perform a Parichara dance song, as you can see here in the last movie sequence. So thank you very much and I look forward to a fruitful discussion. See you.
Thank you, Josh and Matthias, who have enlightened us about how they have decentered power hierarchies and decolonized methodologies in music education and museum archiving. Could you share with us some of the challenges that you faced with the institution, the government, or the community members when you were carrying out these projects, which can actually be very sensitive? And how did you overcome the challenges? Josh, would you like to start first?
Okay. Good morning to all. Thanks very much. Sooi then. Pleasure to meet friends again here. Hello, Ursula. Hello, Sawa. Hello. Glad to see you here. How do decenter power relations? The meeting of knowledge is a sort of upside down, really, because you bring to teach those who were not even able to be students because they are illiterate sometimes. So how was that? Is power has been decentered in this case by introducing members of oppressed traditional communities and peoples with no formal schooling to teach in universities. The university has to accept that it hasn't all the knowledge. It has Western knowledge, indigenous knowledges, Afro-Brazilian knowledges of other peoples and nations have to be taught by those who know those knowledges, who are specialists in those knowledges. So the decentering is more like an expansion of knowledge than, as you say, it's not a rejecting Western knowledge, but a widening the scope of knowledge. Those masters who now teach, they wouldn't be accepted as students, but came as lecturers. So it's an upside down, really, in a double inversion, because that you bring from the communities to the university and bring those who couldn't be students now to come as lecturers. What is possible in this sense, the way it was possible to overcome this power hierarchy, it was somehow from outside the university, because the Institute of Inclusion is part of the National Research Council, of the national, like a Ministry of Technology and Science. So with the prestige associated with the National Research Council, it was possible for the university to accept a new project, because in those national, it's called National Institutes of Sciences and Technologies, they are like 102. And for them, there are 5 really who are applied social sciences, like even Daisy Lucy's, the other institute, which is Plural Brazil, and mine, which is Institute of Inclusion. So one of the parts of the National Research Council is innovation. So we could say that widening the epistemic spectrum is part of an innovation. So that was the argument that allowed, say, to decenter the power hierarchy. And some of the challenges, they are more operational, logistical challenges, because masters live in faraway places, something under indigenous villages, Afro-Brazilian villages far away, under very precarious conditions. So the whole complex situation, how you bring to host them, in comfortable places for, say, 2 or 3 weeks, where they will teach a module of a course at the university, to care for them, to transport back and forth from the university to the place where they are staying. Some of them don't like to be in hotels. They would rather be in houses of colleagues and so on, because they will feel more like a familiar environment. Show them the campus, because they've never been to a university campus before. Show them the city, like in Minas Gerais, in Belo Horizonte, in every city where you have the meeting of knowledge, some of the masters come for the first time to the capital, say, of the state. It is a struggle, I mean, in terms of challenges of various sorts, but not a fight. It's not really a battle like the quotas used to be. Because just to finish, I would say that the real challenge is one that people will accept the importance of bringing the masters as teachers. We cannot force our colleagues to participate. How could they host someone they don't like to have around them? They have to accept first the importance of expansion of knowledge in the universities. Then it will be easier to overcome all those logistical and practical challenges we face. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. Matthias?
Yeah, thank you all for watching. And first of all, I want not to apologize, but just to say that would be great to have Balbina Lambos here, but it was not possible. Where we had this discussion with Sooi, maybe we can go into this as well, how important it is to have the collaborative researcher in discussions like that. Well, what about problems? Honestly, I had not so much problems in the last part, because from 2014 until 2019, I had a postdoc at Universiti Brasilia con Antônio Ferreira, and I was very close learning from Jorge de Carvalho. So the financing was from the CNPq, from the Brazilian
research institution, and it was harder for me in the beginning with the Germans, with the German Phonogram Archive. I mean, it will be recorded, and I have to be careful still because it's a very powerful institution for anthropologists and ethnomusicologists. But as I published about that, I guess it's not a secret to say it was hard to receive the recordings of Koch-Grünberg. So I never worked for the museum, just to don't get any problems. I was always invited. When in 2018 I was invited as a Brazilian anthropologist. So this was interesting for me to be on the other part, coming from East Germany, then a few years in West Germany studying, and then going to Venezuela. So I'm always like a little between North and South. So with the I had the problems not to receive the recordings. It was my professor finally, Ursula Timo Sachse from Free University Berlin. But she was professor in East Germany in the GDR in Rostock. So maybe this may be important to know where I come from, based on this idea of decolonization is not a new topic. For her, it was not a new topic, and she was very supporting my project, but I had no support by funding or had no support by the museum. And this was a struggle to receive the recordings, about a year in the field. They were sent by good people in the field. I don't know how it works. I guess it was an official letter from my professor. I did a PhD that I were able to start that in 2005. It was like 15 years ago. Well, and the community problems, I don't know, maybe there was a lot of problems and there were no problems, because like 15 years living there, I have to say, I had my wife there, my children. And so it's like how Daisy Ribeiro once wrote, convivencias, friction, I would say, living together is friction. So yes, there are always problems, but I think the most important thing is to respect and to learn from each other. And I learned a lot from Giorgio Carvalho and what he said before about this sharing epistemologies, collaborating, and I just started with collaborative theorizing. As all our theories arrived, I had a key situation. It's always like key situation you have in the field, which brings you up to reflect more on what you do and how you interact with the people. And with Balbina Lambos, it was still a friendship, and this is my message. Maybe I guess ethnomusicologists establishing friendships over the years, and trying to transmit that. Just all this short neoliberalistic projects, 2-3 years, I guess it's not working very well. And sometimes I had funding, sometimes I had no funding. So you cannot leave the people because you have no funding. I guess it's quite strange to do that. Well, I don't know what to say, but I have to move more into details. But I was very welcome finally with the project. The Koch-Grünberg recording always received a lot of attention. This is maybe I had no rejection from this part of hearing session. And Balbina was very careful in selecting. And I guess this is the other message. We have to be very, very careful about sound archives and how we manage sound archives. We had yesterday a discussion in the German community about this stuff. So, yeah.
But Matthias, would you like...
I have some additional points here. Yeah.
Yeah, would you like to tell us a bit about why you couldn't put your your collaborator as a co-presenter? Are there any specific reasons that are political or whatever? Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure if I should. Yeah, I'm. To be honest, I'm in the comfort zone here. So. Maybe, yeah. I guess there are a lot of problems, but I would not talk for her in this moment for the political situation.
All right. Okay. And thank you very much, Josh and Matthias. Please keep your questions for the end of the session, and we will just play the next 3 videos now.
Good morning. This research is about the development of a Baniwas family project idealized by Luis Laureano and his father. The project had as one of its objectives the construction of a ceremonial house in the Itacoatiara Mirim village, located in the São Gabriel da Cachoeira surroundings. São Gabriel da Cachoeira is a city in the Upper Rio Negro in Brazil's northwest, a region located in Colombia and Venezuela's borders. The Baniwa are speakers of Arawak language and are one of the 23 people who live in that region. São Gabriel's majority population is indigenous, however, the prejudice is very present. During the last century, many indigenous peoples were attracted to the city, coming from different rivers. The reasons were many, and these reasons have been added up over the years. The Baniwa occupy the Isana River that flows from Venezuela to Brazil. They are about 5,000. About 30 years ago, São Luís Laureano's family, Maadzero, a Baniwa master ceremony, came for health, economic and political reasons from his original village Camarão, in the Iari River. Iari River is one of the tributaries of Isana River, and it is the place where the Baniwa were originated, according to their cosmology. Another objective of the project was to make a documentary about the kuai, sacred instruments which had been submerged there, in the Iari, and to perform an initiation ritual for the young people. The objectives were also to increase the young people's self-esteem through the appreciation of their traditional music, dance, food and drink, strengthening them in face of the violence suffered daily in the city, reinforcing their presence in São Gabriel da Cachoeira, performing in the Maloca, the ceremonial house. About methodology. In 2006, I became a professor and researcher at the Federal University of Amazon, and afterwards I was introduced to André Baniwa, a leader. When he knew that I was an ethnomusicologist, a research dedicated to indigenous music study, he sent me the Podali project, for which they were looking for funding. I see this project as a collaborative work because I was a consultant with other Baniwa partners, sending the project to cultural public notices. The projects were managed by the Indigenous Association, and when they did not obtain support from the public notices, Seu Luís Laureano and his family members articulated their networks in crowdfunding in order to reform and maintain the Maloca. Since its inauguration, the Maloca Casa do Conhecimento has become a landmark in the city for all income authorities, from candidates for the Republic presidents, ministers, army chiefs, and researchers. The City Hall wanted to interfere in the administration of the parties held there, imposing rules such as admission fees, use of masks by the cooks, paving the Maloca, among others. Mr. Luís Laureano managed all the actions and took a firm stance in negotiating these demands with the authorities. For example, about the admission fee, he responded by saying that the Maloca had been built there to remember the way that visitors were always welcome in its tradition, with a lot of caxiri, a beer made from various seasonal fruits, a lot of food, music and dance. It was no charge in an exchange ratio. The name of the Baniwa exchange rituals is Podali, which was the name given to the project. This is just one example of a daily life of arbitrariness experienced by indigenous people in Brazil and in that region. The indigenous peoples of the Upper Rio Negro have a very strong history of struggle and autonomy. Despite having undergone very violent process of slavery at the time of rubber exploitation and other forms of extractivism, of violent evangelization by Salesians and other religions, in Baniua's case, they managed to expel mining in the 80s and conquered the demarcation of a continuous territory. They have a federation, FOIRNI, Federation of Indigenous Organizations in Rio Negro, which is one of the examples in the struggle for the indigenous rights. Some studies classify the Upper Rio Negro's people's rituals into horizontal and vertical. Vertical rituals would be those in which sacred flutes and trumpets sound. There are passage rituals into adulthood, in which communication with ancestors take place. In horizontal rituals, there are exchanges among the relatives. Fruits, agricultural products, fish, music, for example, are exchanged. In Podali project case, the Baniua people work in both directions. In the vertical, making the sacred flutes and trumpets sound, and in the horizontal, they made very significant exchanges and updates also with the non-indigenous world. In this sense, I consider that I am being decolonized, inserted in the exchanges proposed by the Baniua people, learning from this work and also from the indigenous researchers outside and inside the university.
Hello everyone, I feel very honored to share my experiences with you today. My contribution, Power Hierarchies. Whose hierarchy are we talking about? Intends to discuss some of the challenges in regard of power hierarchies during the operation of the research project, Creative Misunderstandings, which was financed by Austrian Science Fund FWF and hosted at the MDW, University of Music and Performing Arts, Vienna. I'm co-leading this project together with the composer Johannes Kretz. This project is situated in the transdisciplinary and practice-based field of artistic research. The research team members appointed for the 4 project lengths consist of 1 ethnomusicologist, that's me, 1 visual and sound artist, and 4 Western academically educated composers who are originally from Austria, Hungary, China, and Taiwan, as well as of 1 dancer and 1 songmaker from the Taiwanese indigenous group Dao, who live on the Taiwanese island of Lanyu. Each team member is free to design his or her own research and is encouraged to work together with the other team members. The research aim of the project is on the one hand to recreate sustainable cultural practices among the Dao, and on the other hand to discover additional positions Western academically trained composers and artists could take in their own societies. In this paper, I will start with the problem of institutional hierarchies and then put the focus on experiences regarding power hierarchies of the 2 Dao team members. Since January 2019, the project team is holding regular meetings, now in digital, in order to discuss project-related philosophical, methodological, and logistic challenges. The wish of the project leadership to build up symmetrical power structures among team members, and also on an academic institutional level, led to a series of discussions between team members and members of the project's advisory board about decolonizing academic practices. In the beginning, we reflected on the power structures of the founding institute, FWF. If the project leadership would not have submitted this practice-based project in the program named PEAK for Artistic Research, we would never have received funding, since FWF supports only ground research except practice-based project in area of artistic research. In the project description, we naively use words like decolonizing or symmetrical power structures, but the hard fact is that the financial resources all come from Austria, so regulations made by FWF must be followed. For example, most of the Dao collaborators didn't even finish the middle school, even though they are knowledgeable persons in their social context, maybe like postdocs or professors in our understandings. Anyhow, according to the official academic regulations, it is not possible to pay them on an equal basis like the rest of the project team members. After 6 months of regular face-to-face discussions and confronting different limitations resulting from the given institutional systems, we realized that our wish for having a symmetrical power structure within our project did not bear any relation to reality. Another factor that strongly influenced power relations within our project was the fact that the Dao and their island since Japanese colonial times have been frequently researched by outsiders who, from the Dao's perspective, stole valuable cultural knowledge to build their own careers. Therefore, in recent years, some Dao intellectuals have expressed their wish to conduct research independently from outsiders. This means they prefer to be able to design their research contents by themselves. All of this led me to the question, what kind of research framework could initiate processes of decolonization? In other words, could a framework be created allowing the Dao team members more space for independence while conducting research, or even providing a position within academia to decolonize academic practices? Therefore, all project members approved my suggestion for participatory action research, PAR, as the methodological framework for our project. This means instead of approaching the Dao team members as informants or interlocutors like in the standard ethnomusicological research setting, within the project team, they are engaged as artistic researchers. The horizontal structure inherent in PAR in aspects like communication, research resource, design, and dissemination connects everyone's research and allows us to have mutual insights about the various existing power hierarchies in which all members are situated in their daily lives. When a 22-year-old autodidactic dancer and artistic researcher Xi Bebwen started to conduct artist research in her own community, the fact that she was treated by the other researchers on eye level caused distrust among their closest family and community members. Nevertheless, she enjoys having the ability to do research and to enrich her knowledge. One of my duties as a co-project leader is to give her support for administrative work, provide her with a technical infrastructure, assist her with methodologies, translations, and copyright issues. Through her own role shifting along with a change of perspectives, Xi Bebwen has gained understandings about the challenges outside researchers have to face in her own social-cultural environment. During the first symposium of ICTM study group in the making for music and dance in indigenous and post-colonial context in December 2020 in Hualien, Taiwan, 8 Dao project members and collaborators were able to attend this conference, either physically or virtually. Xi Bebwen used the format lecture performance for her presentation, which included her artistic work in video format and a live speech. Her speech started by questioning why the name of the ICTM study group in the making for music and dance in indigenous and post-colonial context includes the term post-colonial, even though in her own perception, colonization as a process is still going on. I want to cite some of her lines here. So I looked back the history of Taiwan and realized how complicated it was. The Han Taiwanese people moved to this island and colonized the land first. Then the Western religions have colonized indigenous peoples of Taiwan. We had Japanese who governed these two groups. Afterwards, Han took back the power of this land finally. In the Second World War, American government and culture became powerful in Taiwan. And with that, they have somehow colonized all of us. Now I can really tell what culture I'm living in anymore. The more I study my Dao culture, the more I understand that there is no such form as a pure form of culture. And through dance, I'm searching for my identities where I belong to. Her lecture performance got a high commendation and attention among the participants, not only because of the artistic quality and provocation in her lecture performance, but also because she was the only young indigenous representatives in this 4-day conference. Afterwards, Xi Bebwen told me that she was so stressed when presenting her paper because so many others were watching her. Besides that, performing on stage could be seen as a taboo in the Dao's cultural tradition. Another Dao who attended the conference in person is the traditional music practitioner, activist, and researcher Xiaman Feng'an, also known as Jian Guo. Xiaman Feng'an held a workshop about the aesthetics in the Dao traditional Jing practices and presented an academic paper with the title Beautiful Mistakes, a case study about the social cultural meaning of historical recordings with Dao people. During the conference, Xiaman Feng'an observed that some ethnomusicologists gave order to their indigenous performers, also peers of Xiaman Feng'an from other indigenous groups of Taiwan, what and which formats they should sing and perform. He felt that these performers shouldn't be treated like puppets, and started to explain them about his experience in our project with participatory action research. I was very surprised about his reaction, but I also realized that his way of sharing could be even more effective and powerful in decolonizing people's mindset than my own writings or lectures. At the end of the conference, Xiaman Feng'an was elected as a member of the advisory non-executive board of directors of the study group. Based on this event, he felt that he has been accepted from the academic community. What changed his perspective and gave him even more the feeling of responsibility towards the field of indigenous studies in Taiwan. This position empowered him to question things, what most researchers take for granted. The examples of Xi Baba and Xiaman Feng'an show that power hierarchies can vary depending on the individual condition from context to context. Xi Baba is situated in hierarchies which result from two dimensions. One is the national history of Taiwan and the remaining colonial mindsets. The other one is rooted in the social-cultural context of the Dao themselves, such as age segregation and traditional taboo system. Xiaman Feng'an, in contrary, knows how to deal with the traditional taboo system and is already beginning to use his position as a member of board of directors in an ICTM study group to question and challenge academic practices with colonial attitude. What I personally learned from my experiences within the Creative Misunderstandings project is that only if we as researchers start to differentiate existing power hierarchies more carefully and make these differentiating processes transparent for discussion, we could recognize the methodological gaps of research design during decolonization processes, be it free space for more personal autonomy and mutual acceptance of each other's limitations resulted from the systems and structures, or be it to find alternative research methods to change roles in research and to deconstruct existing power structures. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to the discussions.
This last presentation focuses on the decentering of power hierarchies through collaborative research and artistic creation in the revitalization of the Glove Puppet Theatre in Penang, Malaysia. As a minority Chinese academic living in a post-colonial country that is polarized by race, religion, and politics, it is my responsibility to reconstruct the research methodologies and agendas that exist within post-colonial and national frameworks which try to capture, fix, and essentialize race. To challenge methodologies where the researcher is seen as the cultural expert who represents the researched, and to decolonize the ethos or mindsets of academics who consider the West and China for the Chinese arts as the centers of cultural production. In this presentation, I attempt to show that research creation or artistic research is a methodology that can revitalize endangered forms such as the Glove Puppet Theatre in Penang. It is also a decolonizing collaborative project that can decenter the power of the nation-state and the academic to benefit the cultural bearers. Research creation is a type of practice-based research where creative works are the objectives of research. It allows artists and scholars to collaborate on a common project, acknowledging each participant's expertise in the production of creative work. What is potehi? It is a type of glove puppet theatre from Fujian, South China, that was brought to Malaysia, Southeast Asia, and Taiwan by the diaspora. It is performed at temple celebrations and for entertainment in Malaysia. The form has been flexible. Puppeteers in the different countries are open to change, to attract audiences and to survive. I started this research creation project in response to the Potehi performers who asked me, "How can your research benefit us? The form is dying." Potehi is performed only for temple deities and no one watches it today. There are no apprentices. Young people educated in Mandarin are not interested as they do not understand the Hokkien language anymore that is used in the Potehi. In an effort to revitalize and create new interest in the endangered art of Potehi in Penang, a group of artists and researchers, including myself, formed two collectives. One, the Friends of Potehi, engaged in the collaborative process of documentation and publication regarding the form. Second, we encouraged a group of young people in the Chinese and other communities known as Ombak Potehi to learn the art of puppet manipulation, narration, and musical accompaniment from the masters of the oldest troupe in Penang, the Beng puppet troupe. I make a case for artistic research or research creation as a methodology that is appropriate for decentering and complicating power hierarchies, that can promote communication with different types of audiences, and that can create conviviality and broader crossings among participants and audiences. How do we decenter the power of the academic? We formulated bottom-up participatory action research approaches that emphasize dialogue, collective work, and collaborative knowledge production, together with the traditional practitioners, students, and young researchers in all aspects of research creation. We adapted the pedagogical approach of Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, who argues that through the processes of dialogue, communities become conscientized to actively struggle for social justice and transformation in their own societies. The young people in Ombak Potehi researched and documented the form. They learned puppet manipulation directly from the traditional masters at the traditional performance stage. One must know the form before one can make changes or disseminate it. The young performers learned the traditional stories and the music. As part of our outreach program, Ombak Potehi brought school children of different races to see the Penang Story 1 and 2. Ombak Potehi members then ran workshops for multi-ethnic school children who painted their own puppet heads and costumes. They learned the simple movements of the main character types in puppet theatre. By so doing, the children were introduced to a form they had never experienced. They interacted with one another during the workshop. During the COVID lockdown, the traditional performers could not earn a living as performances in temples and in the streets were not allowed. The Ombak Potehi young people applied for some funding to make a series of videos about Potehi that were streamed live on social media. The decolonial dimension here is that the young people carried out the interviews with the masters without the mediation of the academic. Through research creation, we also attempt to decenter the power of the nation-state through localized stories from the community, such as the Penang Story 1 and 2. The young apprentices recontextualized and created localized stories for wider audiences. The Penang Story is based on the multi-ethnic history of Penang that is not found in the nationalistic narratives of school history texts. Based on interviews with the multi-ethnic people of Penang and history from below, we reclaim the history and voices of the communities. Puppets can communicate social issues very well. The Penang Story 1 is about 4 friends of different races and their interactions in business and everyday life in the cosmopolitan port of Penang before the Second World War. Penang's story too recalls the memories and struggles of the people during the Japanese occupation and their journey to independence. For example, we added a scene called Suk Ching, the purge of the Chinese people thought to be anti-Japanese during the Japanese occupation of Penang. These people were identified by local collaborators with their heads covered. Through research creation, we also promote the cultures of the minority Chinese that are not included in the national culture and glitzy spectacles staged by the nation state for tourism. The next slide shows the use of the local Penang Malay dialect in the play.
Singgah dekat jerejak kena paksa periksa dengan suntik. Agak penyakit tak berjangkit. Sampai Penang atau Tuipi mana dia pergi kat Lebo Pasar. I tell you rumba pereo. Little India hari-hari kan macam pesta.
We also rejuvenate street performances by taking shows outside of the temple. Our shows are open to all ethnic groups and generations. Unlike the Western concert hall and the proscenium stage, audiences sit or stand around the stage. They socialize with one another. Research creation or artistic research that involves horizontal collaboration with communities is a methodology that is appropriate for the decolonization of performing arts research. Puppets and performers can say things that ordinary people cannot say, especially regarding sensitive issues. By engaging and involving culture bearers and young people in the process of transmission and recontextualization of Potehi, we decenter the power relations between the researcher and the research, and the academic and the cultural bearers. The communities and youths not only participate in academic research, but are involved in knowledge production that can engender change. They are then empowered to take over the project without the mediation of the academic or professional. By creating new stories with local multi-ethnic characters and musical cultures based on history from below, we decenter the power of the nation-state that tries to fix and essentialize race and reclaim the voices and histories of the multi-ethnic people. For the Chinese in Malaysia, research creation is also a way to assert our diverse cultures, languages, and identities that differ from those in China. We challenge the center-periphery paradigm, where the cultures in China are seen to be more authentic and more worthy of study than those of the Chinese in diaspora. Thank you very much. Okay, while you are thinking about your questions, I would just like to pose two questions to Daisy and Wei-Ya. So please put down your questions in the chat box. You can also raise your hand if you would like to speak, and I will call on you later. Daisy, you mentioned that you have been decolonized through your project. Can you elaborate a bit about that, and also tell us some of the challenges that you faced in your project and how did you overcome them? Daisy?
Good morning. I am very happy to see a lot of friends and colleagues here. Your first question about why I have been decolonized in the project. It was a way to say that in my formation at the university, at the school, I didn't have indigenous people as colleagues or as teachers. And when I arrived in Manaus, in Amazon, It was the first anthropology program in Brazil in that moment that opened vacancies to indigenous people. Then when I arrived, I had a class with a lot of indigenous people, and the challenge was open the ear, open the mind, to don't in the way to proportionate them, not only reproduce the anthropology theory, but to create, to talk about their theories in the classroom, in their writers. In the same moment, I was invited to this project that I present. That was another place in the city, a small city in Amazon. Then I live these two in both situations in the same moment, and I consider that it wasn't a challenge properly. It was a gift, because I agree with you that the decolonization is a long process, but in that moment, I felt that was a piece, a little piece in this long process, because I learned with them in both cases, in the classroom with the students, and in São Gabriel with seu Luiz Laureano and his family, because they are very, very autonomous. When we presented these projects and they were proponents, they made all the arrangements, the workshops, all the arrangements, they bought the flights, the flight tickets, they made everything. And this, in this city of São Gabriel da Cachoeira, was very, very significant. I tried to talk about that in the video, but it was not only a little situation, it was in the day by day life, because in Brazil, all the rights that indigenous people conquered became restricted to the indigenous that lives in villages in their territory. All the indigenous that comes to the city became outside of the rights. Then they are very, very, they don't have education, special health. Now in the pandemic situation, they did a very, very, very strong struggle to conquer the vaccination, because in Brazil, the indigenous that comes to the city is not considered indigenous anymore. It's a struggle yet in our days. I don't know if I responded, but about the hierarchy, I was talking about in the city of São Gabriel da Cachoeira, I saw the change of power hierarchy in the respect of the persons that live in the city, this family especially.
Yeah, thank you, Daisy. Wei-Ya?
Yes.
Yeah, would you like to share?
Yeah, I have two challenges I think was mentioned. So the first challenge is the ontological and epistemological differences among the project team. This means the processes of knowledge are very different. So for example, for the DAO, it is a must actually to do practical work. They plant taros or sweet potatoes by their own, the fish by their own, they build boats and house by their own. And even today, when they have all kinds of accesses to modern machinery, they still do it. And in contrary, for the Austria-based members, it is not so important to do practical work in creative processes. So they put their focus more on brain work like thinking, reflecting, reading, writing, etc. So to reach a level of a deeper mutual understanding needs really a lot of time and physical interactions. And the project is just for 4 years and with a limited financial resources. So we do regular Zoom meetings twice a month. In every meeting, there's always a topic scheduled for discussion in order to exchange thoughts in conceptual level. And this topic should be defined and then led by team members, rotatedly. And through these regular meetings and methods in artistic research and ethnomusicology, so we try to fix this gap, these differences. And the second one is actually about property rights of historical recordings. And for this certain case, I actually don't have any solution, but maybe you here have some for me. So the story started in 2016 when I visited a French anthropologist at her house. I don't say her name here, she's still alive. She showed me her collection and wanted me to have them later. I said, no, it's better to archive somewhere and give the DAO a copy, of course. And she said, yes, she's doing so. On the same day, I went back to Paris and accidentally told about this meeting to the former director of CREM, so Research Center of Ethnomusicology in Paris. So the director was Victor Stoichitzer. And he happily informed me that exactly this collection is stored at his institution. And he advised me how to assess this collection. So of course I followed his advice. So I got the access to this collection, and the French anthropologist was informed about my registration. Followed by this, she wrote me an email that she shouldn't listen to these recordings until she finished completing the metadata and protocols for the collection. So she has started working actually on this already when I first time met her in 2016, and she's not yet finished today. So I waited for her until summer 2019, and I started to play the songs in front of Shaman Feng and other DAO collaborators. Because one of the research aim is to produce pitching material for DAO pupils based on knowledge stored in the traditional songs. So as I mentioned in my video, DAO have been researched by outsiders since more than 1 century. So their history is also written by the outsiders. Shaman Feng other DAO collaborators, and I wish to create a version of DAO's history based on DAO's own perspective for their coming generations. We started to define which historical collections of traditional songs would be suitable. In summer 2019, when I first time played the collection from CREM, Shaman Feng and other DAO collaborators found it most interesting and important. This collection is one of the largest collections of the DAO traditional knowledge. It contains 500 hours of recording, songs, narratives, knowledge in astrology, history, agriculture, maritime culture, blah, 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 recorded between 1971 and 1999. So Shaman Feng, the director of Lang En Foundation, Shaman Jabaktu, and governmental leader of the village where this anthropologist has stayed during her fieldwork periods, wrote an official letter to CREM and wished to have a copy of this collection on 27th April 2020, sent through email by Xi Bebewen, so the dancer I mentioned in the video. She's also here. And the director of CREM replied 1 week later and asked if Bebewen could send the letter again as an attached file. And since then, Xi Bebewen has never received any reply from CREM. So maybe you have suggestion. This is a really big challenge with institutions.
Yeah. Thank you, Wei-Ya. I think in my case, my biggest challenge is that the communities and the young apprentices became reliant on the academic to look for grants, to initiate projects, and to produce the shows on their behalf. So it was very difficult for me to decenter power in the research creation project, even though, I tried to encourage horizontal collaboration. So after 6 years, I've decided that I need to withdraw from the project and let the young people take over and work with the practicing communities. They can make their own decisions about sustaining the form themselves. So I think that this is the best way to decenter the power of the academic. Yeah. Okay, so we have many questions in the chat box. Let me start with the first one by Karine Aguilera. Would you like to ask the question to Daisy? Karen, are you around? Karen? No. Her question is, what are the greatest difficulties in institutional terms, bureaucracy, technical protocols, etc., you have been facing during your collaborative research project? This question is for Daisy.
Hi, Karine. When we did this project, the foundations were very open in that time in Brazil to indigenous people. Then they had a easy communication with for example, Petrobras Cultural was one of the funds that they had. They had a very, very easy communication. Okay, bureaucracy is difficult to in every situation, but not. It's not. It was okay. They had success in their at the university. If I had made if I was the proponent by university, we had have a lot of trouble, bureaucratic trouble. But as the Indigenous Association was the proponent, it was easy to solve the questions, to use the money, to bought the things. I think that the university is more bureaucratic than when they are proponents of the projects. At the university, I didn't have trouble with this project.
Okay. The next question is from Shingai Nadinga. Would you like to ask the question yourself? Shingai Nadinga? No? Okay, I'll read it. As a Central and Southern African master's student based in Europe, may I ask how a decolonized theoretical framework may look like, given that the canon itself that we are still taught today is entirely Western? Maybe George, can you answer that question?
Hello. Yes, could you please repeat it once more, please?
As a Central and Southern African master's student based in Europe, may I ask how a decolonized theoretical framework may look like, given that the canon itself that we are still taught today is entirely Western?
Yes. Well, we have to decolonize those two curriculum from the global south, from the diversity of multi-ethnic countries, and maybe different strategies from central countries, how to decolonize them. This is the way I see it. But I think the case of music is the strongest, the most radical, exclusive type of curriculum. I don't know if what I see, there are two strategies from countries like ours and from Western central countries. The strategy should be different, I think. Once is to decolonize, decolonized, as in our case. Another one, how to decolonize the colonizer. It's like an internal struggle that has to be faced with a particular strategy for France, Britain, Germany, and so on. I don't know if I make myself clear.
Okay. The next, Ursula has a question. Ursula, would you like to ask the question yourself? And you can unmute yourself. Unmute the button at the bottom on the left.
She is unmuted, but we are not hearing her for some reason.
I tried Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was the headphone that I want to thank everyone for this wonderful panel. Eyes on the right way after all those years. Thank you so much. Just in reaction to the question that George answered, we are actually in dialogue about decolonizing our universities. And I think we are, well, we did the first steps, at least the University of Music and Performing Arts, by changing the curriculum and by including other musical languages, because Vienna, of course, is very much based on Western art music. But we try to get in other ways of music in the world. But my question would be to you, Sooi Beng. It struck me that you mentioned at the beginning of your paper your ethnic background as a responsibility for your activity. You had this little sentence in the beginning. Now I'm asking myself, in how far is the personal situation of researchers involved in these approaches, and what is the reason for feeling responsible?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ursula. I am a minority Chinese that's living in a Muslim country and with a majority of Malays. So I feel that it is my responsibility to struggle for minority rights in the country. So I think that all my projects are actually part of this bigger struggle for the rights of the minorities, to recover our histories that have been silenced in history texts, and to also recover the memories of the older people who went through a lot, trying to build this nation that is called Malaysia today. So I think minorities also played a very big role, and that this history needs to be recovered. So I'm trying to do this through research creation at this point, because I think it's easier to communicate through the arts and through performances with ordinary people and the younger generation. So many of the shows that we have put up, the young people do not even know that these things happened during the war, or how their grandparents had to suffer and struggle as migrants in this country, and so on. So that for me, is doing research, and doing research creation is actually part of a bigger struggle. Okay, Susanna has a question for George. Would you like to ask a question?
Hi, can you listen to me? Yes? Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think this panel is wonderful. I'm learning a lot. And congratulations, Beng, for putting all these wonderful colleagues together. Well, my question is there. It's to José Jorge. We are always inspired in his work, of course, here in Portugal, and we have some projects here inspired in his own work, and Samuel also. Samuel is here with us. But we have always this problem when we want to publish something using the plural for the word knowledge. And the editors always send a suggestion to use kinds of knowledge. And in addition, we have this in Portuguese and Spanish, we have this word, which is saberes, which is slightly different from knowledges or from knowledge. And they both are very rich, but they have quite different meanings. like we can do encontros de saberes e fazeres, we can do meetings of encuentros de saberes y haceres in Spanish, which is wonderful, but we cannot do this in English. So how do you deal with this problem? That should we, in order to decolonize, include the word saberes in the English language, as we included so many words from the English language in our own language? Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Susanna. Wonderful to see you here again. Yes, I think we have to struggle. The language has to be transformed with time. For instance, as you say, the word saberes, because it sounds very well in Portuguese, encontro de saberes. It sounds really nice. So if I say meeting of knowledge, it doesn't make much sense to me. No, it has to be knowledges. Actually, some of the translations of Rumi, the Sufi master of the 13th century, the meeting of two oceans, sometimes they say the meeting of two knowledges, with the Rumi and Shams and so on, that I translate into Portuguese. Well, with the Ursula's book that we published now, the Transculturelle Erkundungen, I used the meeting of knowledges and they accepted it. For instance, if you take Mackenziewicz English, it's amazing. Huh? His language is an absolutely idiosyncratic. His grammar, the way he pushes adjectives to become verbs and so on, and that's Macken's, Igbo-based, English. So we have to insist. If I think meeting of knowledges makes more sense, I will ask the editor. Yes, but this is Brazilian English, not British English or American English or Australian English. And I think the word mastery, for instance, and mastery and master, it's a powerful word too. Master doesn't get the complete sense of it because there's a kind of a patriarchal effect on master, whereas masteries in Portuguese, it's really a mixture of knowledgeable person, a wise person, and even a kind of tender person. It all goes together with mastery and master. So maybe, as you say, in the meta language of ethnomusicology, we can start to use those words from other languages.
So let's do a movement to include knowledges in plural in the English language.
Yes. It's like in Malaysia, would be Chinese knowledge, Indian knowledge, right? Malay knowledge. So with knowledges. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Samuel, would you like to ask the question?
Yes, for sure. Well, hi, everyone.
Hi.
I thank also to all panel members for this exciting presentation, this exciting debate. And I'll take a lift first in my dear colleague Susanna's question. And I'll give also a colonized answer. I cite Walter Benjamin, famous essay on translation. He says, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, that there is no point in translating if it's not to force the surrogate language to accept changes. I mean, some hard changes. And so I guess this is what we are about here too. But my question is related to a problem that I see in this emerging paradigm that somehow contrasts to other equally valid paradigms, as José Jorge rightfully put it. And this is a particular question to Matthias, because I'm now working on archives too. Archives from a 20-year collaborative project and so on. And these questions keep emerging. The question is, as new decolonizing relationships between traditional-popular artists and academic-archiving institutions emerge, issues of representativity and ownership tend to emerge too. This is particularly observed in archiving, because a heritage that used to be passed from generation to generation orally, from direct interaction and so on, begins to be materialized in objects, in material objects, right? And then questions of ownership, representativity, keep emerging all the time. And I'm asking, have you experienced, the panel members, anything like that in your respective work? How have you and your collaborators dealt with them? They actually emerged.
Matthias?
Should I answer? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I will answer. I don't know if I have an answer. I try. It is absolutely, specifically with indigenous communities in the Americas, is a big topic. I don't know if you know the Navajo thing from Rainer Hatum, I guess, and for me, it's the best example where we have this ontological gap and the cultural clash. So maybe I could recommend Rainer Hatum. And the problem was, it's not a problem. It's in discussion if the original Wechselner of I don't know, who was it, George Herzog's recordings with the Navajo should be destroyed. So I guess this is a very strong topic for us as anthropologists, or as ethnomusicologists. Sorry, as more as ethnomusicologists. It depends. I would say yes, absolutely, we should. But this is about the ownership. But it's, I guess, the problem when comparing this, as I work with some material culture, with sound objects, this is quite different. And I see 2 or 3 points as a real problem. First of all, just giving copies doesn't mean we give originals. It's not a restitution in a way of restitution. There's another great article from Grace Cohen in this context I should mention. So I learned a lot from her. One thing is dealing with the existing archives, and the other thing is what we do in the field when we record. We should be clear about the point that what we do if we should record. But this is another question. What we do in the archive is 2 points. One thing I see, all this idea about publishing and free access, which is now the big issue, and digitalization to receive money because everything needs to be digitalized is a huge problem. Ownership, there was another question in the chat. In my specific case, was not with the original wax cylinders. I asked it, but this was not the question. I was very surprised. I'm not sure if my perception was good, but I asked, and it was not so much question about human ownership, but it's the ownership of, and I'm going to go now into ontological fields. We have to remind us it was the ownership of spirits and the ownership of animals and spirits and stuff like that. A huge topics Anthony Siegel wrote about. It's not nothing new in our area in South America. I guess he knows it, but the problem I see more in Europe. I don't know which archive you work, Samuel, and in Brazil, but in Europe I see it is not reflected about all these issues, and there's a lot of work to do about ownership and non-human ownership, which is not even existing in the reflection about our field. And the second thing is the interaction with physical objects. As I told before, I haven't. Don't know if you realize in the movie these objects would be able to be seen, which were visible. This is not a problem. The object was in a case, and what is often happening, and there are articles and from museums members that, or what I see in videos, when they invite indigenous people to the museum in their new decolonization era, is that they go to the vitrines. Is it vitrines? Showcases, sorry. Vitrine is German. You go to the showcase and they're singing a dance, they perform. So there's a Hungry Listening book, but I see that since years that there's a necessity or necessary to create the spaces for performance, just to start a relationship with these physical objects, and this interaction is sound. So there's a lot of, we have this sound interaction. This is not about seeing and touching. Well, it's also as well, but there's a lot of sound thing and performing thing where we as ethnomusicologists have to act, I guess, in the moment in a European museums context, as far as I see. But this is the two fields. One thing is ownership, non-human ownership, and the second thing, interaction with so-called physical object, which creating ontological units. It's not only arrow to arrow and then what is this old idea of archiving. And we have the phonogram archive where all the sound is, but we have to reunite these objects, or the indigenous people, if they want to, whatever. It's not I did not reflect about it, I'm not a curator, I'm not working in a graphic museum, but just to certain thing to say, at the MAC, there's an archive about Vienna recordings. Madeleine Leclerc, I don't want to talk for her, but we are now doing a transmission of the sharing knowledges projects, ideas from Giorgio Carvalho and from you, Samuel, to take over, to include more from learning from the south into the north, and how we can work together, starting a collaboration, which is not happening in the morning, with indigenous people and people which have their ancestors' recordings there. So this is just the first step. So there's a lot of things to do. Is that more or less what?
Okay, Matthias, you have another question from Mary Lo.
Yeah, I guess this was in this direction, Nora, with the ownership.
Okay.
Is it or?
Yeah, Mary Lo, would you like to say something?
Okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate the presentations. Learning a lot too. Yes, my question is quite similar to Samuel's questions, and I think in your answer, Matthias, you developed more or less the questions I made. But anyway, would you like to answer if they consider those recordings, the people you worked with at the Guyana and Northern Brazil, if they consider those images as something that they own in a certain way? I don't know if you want to develop a little bit more.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Sure. Well, it isn't easy to answer because there is no source community. There's a lot of people, and everyone is giving another answer. So I cannot talk for them. I can only talk from my experiences as something hybrid. And I was very wondering in the beginning that it wasn't the case. So yeah, I expected something in the Navajo style and the ownership thing. But it went more in this direction. Who recorded that? Why? This is you cannot play that. Please stop. These were 2 or 3 recordings where we made with Balbina. I will not go into this area which kind of recordings are, and they are published, by the way, by the museum. But it's another question. So is not the ownership of a human ownership? It's my interpretation. But for sure, it's other people say it's an ownership. When we talk about sailing, it is published. It's their recordings. So but the museum never asked, and I was never involved in any interaction in dealing with publication and stuff like that. I bought. I had to bought some later before they sent. I bought the things in the museum for €15 each. So there was absolutely no interaction with the ethnographic museum. And this time we talk about 15 years ago. So now it is. So what should I tell? Yes, I gave the recordings, but we never had this kind of copyright and ownership thing in the case like it would be in the West. Like no, I don't experience that. there are different stories. One say we have the ownership, I have the ownership, he's having the ownership, and maybe the Brazilian, we have to talk to the Makushi. But there are different recordings, not only Pemon. This is he made recordings in one village with a lot of people with Makushi, Jekwana, Wapichana, and so I only selected a few, where I think it was Arekuna and Taurepan and a few Makushi, and which was by Bina together. She said, "Now let's listen to this with Makushi expert, for example." And he realized that the ownership is having the shaman who once sung the song, but he did not claim the ownership for the community or for him. Some even they never want to hear it. No, what? Who? No, I wouldn't hear a recording from another one. Is that will be recorded? Published? Sorry, I shouldn't talk too much about it, but it's the ownership, I guess, to finalize it is a huge question, and it should be discussed. Long-term relationships with long-term investigations and interactions. And the museum, from my perspective, is still in the beginning. It's just the first step, and we need to enter there. And ethnomusicologists, that should be our next task. So I'm finished now. Talking too much.
Okay, thank you. Keith Howard. Keith, do you have a comment or question?
Not really. Sorry, I was just saying I'm learning a lot. I've got a lot to learn, so keep me out of it for the moment. Just let me absorb.
Okay, thank you. Pedro, would you like to say something? No? Okay,
no, I think my English is better in the writing than the speaking.
Okay. Okay, Sarah, would you like to ask your question?
Oh, am I unmuted now? Someone nod. Okay, good.
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah,
my question actually, Sooi Beng, was direct to your comment that after 6 years I have to leave. They have to do it themselves. They can't rely on the academy. I feel I have to invert the structure here. And then I started thinking, when that happens though, we have to think about this in the field, because as has been demonstrated in the talks from most people who presented today, their access to the things that you can get from the hierarchies then gets cut off if the people who have access to those hierarchies sort of remove themselves from the process. And so, that's my question: is how to negotiate that? So you have access to money, you have institutional structure, you have the epistemological knowledge of how to write a grant. So when you step away, if they haven't got someone who has fingers in those areas where they can then pull, how do we negotiate that? So that's, this is not a criticism. This is like, how do we continue to make these things happen?
Yeah. I think part of our strategy is to educate the young people, because they actually have some kind of education and are able to write, but in a different language, maybe Mandarin. They are not good in Malay or in English.
Yeah.
So we actually train them to do this. To do the applications. So actually it works, because this year, because of the COVID, I was not involved at all. And they were able to, get grants by themselves. And Fantastic. They just ran the projects themselves. So I think this strategy works. Yeah. If I were to just remain there, they would be just reliant on me forever. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but but what you've done, but you haven't articulated, is that part of this process involves training and teaching people, or providing people with the tools that they need to begin to access, and that kind of activist aspect is a very important part of this decolonizing process, and that chimes in with the theme that you have here, which is not getting rid of everything that's Western or hierarchically structured into the ranking of society, but actually making sure the openings stay. that you created actually stay in and continue to be available. So that's an essential thing to say. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We also need to give them skills so that they are able to interview and do research on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're very good with the technical, recording and all that, so they can make use of their skills very well. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have so many questions, 33, but our time is sort of running out. So I don't think we can finish all the questions, but we'll just go as many as we can, before 10 o'clock. Solomon, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much for giving me this space to say something. Thank you very much for your comprehensive and splendid presentation. I just believe that one of the challenges being faced by dance and music researchers in the process of decolonizing, is the language of research. Even in post-colonial times, the covert expectation is that scholars use a world language such as English to disseminate their findings and to make their research contribution. The suggestive power of language should not be underestimated, nor its dual character as a means of communication and as a carrier of culture. So my question is, what are your strategies to deal with this language monopoly, to make sure that your researches or studies are informed by local languages that capture the epistemologies and ontologies of the communities understood, as well as to shape your theoretical and conceptual frameworks? That's my question. Thank you.
Are you addressing the question to somebody specific, or
just in general?
Would somebody like to answer the question?
Maybe I could dialogue with Solomon in a moment, if it's possible. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Solomon, I think you touched a very crucial question. If we are especially if we are in the south of the world, the neoliberal university forces us to write in English and participate in Congress only in English. So if the best that we can offer from our research and from our participation and collaborations is translated only into English, the communities wouldn't benefit from it. So we will have to do at least the double situation. We will have to be plurilingual, we have to be bilingual or plurilingual. We will have to write for people here and to also write in English for our colleagues and so on. But this has to be systematic, I think. Whereas all our universities are putting pressure on us as if English has more merit and have even more numbers as the way they evaluate in the ranking. And this is we have to fight it. I think you made a very good question. I agree with you.
Thank you very much for such a comprehensive answer.
Okay. Cheng Guo, are you there? You have a question for Wei-Ya, yeah? Cheng Guo?
Hi.
Wei-Ya, would you like to answer the question?
No, I think we have the same question. I just mentioned it again.
Because I said as the challenge that Zheng Guo is also the Shiba Bowen, the dancer I talked in the video, and she's asking actually, so how should we have, is there anybody have a solution to take the Dao's recordings back from France? And this is her question. So if it's a question posed to the audience, actually, I think.
Okay, yeah. Heather says, Pedro has a question but needs a translator, yeah? Is that right, Pedro? You can ask your question in Portuguese and then can somebody translate? Matthias? Can you translate for Pedro?
I
Always ask
him. I can translate for him if they.
Yeah, I guess it's better.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a Portuguese speaker. I'm speaking Portuguese.
Susana, yeah, or Samuel or Susana.
Okay, Pedro, yeah.
A minha pergunta tem tem a ver com o tipo específico de contratação do professor universitário no Brasil. E como que esse processo, me parece, está longe de poder absorver um mestre como professor. Então, assim, o Encontro de Saberes é uma proposta muito louvável, né? Uma proposta que a gente admira, que a gente gosta, quer fazer também, mas ela acaba sendo um paliativo. O ideal mesmo seria que os mestres estivessem dentro da universidade, construindo os currículos, o cotidiano, junto com todos nós. E aí na verdade, quando eu ouço, e aí eu vejo muita gente que não é brasileiro, eu sinto falta de uma explanação um pouco sobre esse problema que a gente tem, porque eu sinto que em outros lugares do mundo isso é um pouco diferente. É até possível. Eu tenho um amigo, por exemplo, na Inglaterra, que não fez graduação, é músico também, músico prático, né? É instrumentista, não fez graduação, não fez mestrado, entrou direto no doutorado, numa universidade inglesa. Ele saiu daqui do Rio de Janeiro, de uma favela, inclusive, foi morar lá, bandolinista, chegou lá e entrou direto no doutorado. Então, sinto que em outros países isso não é tão rígido, essa questão. Só para dar uma explanadinha e falar assim, sobre isso, né? E só falar que eu defendo que hajam tradutores entre nós para todo mundo poder entender tudo. Nos congressos também. Se puder traduzir também. Obrigado.
Você está no Brasil? Você está no Brasil? Você está em que país agora? Só isso.
Eu estou no Rio de Janeiro.
Ah, bom. Okay. Thanks. Well, Pedro, he had written that before. He's asking about how you hire people who haven't got a diploma, like the case of the masters. No? He's worried with this, as he said before, because he said in Brazil it's very difficult, all the process of hiring staff for universities and so on. What I'm saying, Pedro, there is an expression which I can write here, which is notório saber. I usually translate it as acknowledged higher knowledge. The dash way, the higher knowledge, that's in Chinese, right? Like the Confucius classics. The acknowledged higher knowledge. I mean, the masters have an acknowledged higher knowledge. So one of our struggles is to grant the masters the title, what's called the notório saber. I can write it here in Portuguese. Susana, that would be another word that maybe it becomes part of our metagrammar, right? Not only saberes, but the notório saber, acknowledge higher knowledge. This is an equivalent of a PhD. So the University of Minas Gerais, we are now at the end of this semester, like June, July, we may have 8 masters who will have this equivalent of a diploma. So it will be easier for them to participate and be paid. So far, we pay them as temporary. But so Pedro is asking me about whether the masters should also participate in the decolonization, the change of the curriculum, and so on. That's fine. But he's asking whether the masters should be with us. It has always to be a back and forth. As we go to the communities to help and come back, they can come to help us and go back because they have their role in their communities. So there's no sense in imagining that the masters will become regular professors like we are. It will always be, as I understand it, an exchange for 1 month, for 2-3 weeks, and so on. Then they are back to their communities where they have their role to play there. But with the notório saber, with this title, we formalize, because to decolonize, we have also to change the administration somehow. The way the Humboldtian type of university has to move to another one, the transdisciplinary, and the borders of even the border of knowledges is also part of it. So we have to, first we do it, and then we try to legitimize it. So the second step, Pedro, is the notório saber, is the title of acknowledged higher knowledge. But with the transformation of the curriculum, as you said, sure, they will be together. We will be Afro-Brazilian music, which courses we will give on percussion, candomblé sacred percussion, which will be the styles. We can discuss this together with the Indigenous, right? We can devise another curriculum with them. It is possible. That's more or less the way I will answer.
Yeah, I think in Malaysia also we have this. We created a new category called artists in residence. So people who don't have masters and PhDs can actually be employed under this category. And so we have traditional artists who come in either part-time or full-time, to teach specific performance genres, traditional performance genres to the student. So, we just have to fight with the administrators to say that this is very important for heritage and, try to get a new type of category that can be, used for hiring and employing those that who don't have the degrees. Yeah. Okay, I think we need to end now because it's 10 o'clock. Maybe we can, those of you who have questions can email us and we can answer some of your questions through email. And I think that some of the issues will be raised in the upcoming dialogues and we can continue our conversations then. Thanks to everybody who zoomed in, and thank you to ICTM for the opportunity to share our experiences through this series of dialogues. So thank you very much and see you in 2 weeks' time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.